Matt Green. For those of you who don't know me, I am a part-time municipal judge here in the city of Mobile. Before that, I was a prosecutor in the Baldwin County District Attorney's Office for 3.5 years. I worked for David Whetstone, and I left that position to come here to the city of Mobile. That's where I'm from, born and raised, to become a municipal judge. The municipal court, I won't get into all the details of it, but mostly we just handle small misdemeanor criminal cases. And also, since I'm part-time, I also practice law on the side as well. I'm very excited about giving this presentation. I've actually given it one time before to a group of lawyers in our local Inns of Court, and it was pretty well received. It's a very interesting story. Most people have never heard of this story. It's kind of been something that's it's been forgotten, but everything I'm about to tell you is completely true. Just by a show of hands, just curious, how many people here in this room were born in Mobile and lived here all their life? Great. So you'll probably recognize a lot of the names involved in this case. A lot of the people involved, judges, persons of interest, because it was a case that involved two families, one from here in Mobile and one across the eastern shore, two prominent families, and you'll recognize they're still around today. At least the Fibbits family is, the victim's family, they kind of moved on, no longer in Mobile. But let me start off by telling you, this was probably the most notorious honor killing in the city of Mobile's history. It happened in 1932. In fact, we're coming up on the 79th anniversary of it. It happened literally right across the street. You won't see it at the Battle House, which is where this occurred. You won't read about it on the wall. You won't know anything about it really unless you visit the website that I created. It tells you a little bit about it, and I'll get into that later. But let me start at the beginning. The story starts out, and it reads like a story, like a tale, because it sounds like something that's made up, and this is completely true. August 16, 1969, Radney's funeral home was the funeral of an old attorney here in Mobile. His name was Sam Johnson. Sam Johnston was probably, at one time in the city of Mobile, or in South Alabama, one of the most prominent defense attorneys around. In his early career, he took on mostly criminal cases, and he took on a lot of high-profile criminal cases. His family, actually, when he passed away, there was a cover story on the paper that talked about what a loss it was to Mobile's legal community. It says he was heard quoting the classics of Shakespeare, and it was one of those fire and oratory. He had to give the oratory. Everybody in the courthouse, when they heard Sam Johnson was speaking or giving closing arguments or arguing any case or any trial, everybody would jam into the courtroom to go see him. Now, the old courthouse, now it's a grassy lot. It's there Royal Street, Government Street. That's where the old beautiful courthouse used to be, and that's where he practiced his trade. Now, Johnston, he was born in, I believe, in the 1890s. He was a young guy. He took on a lot of these criminal cases. He was, I don't know if any of you know about the whiskey wars that happened here during Prohibition in the early mid-20s. The U.S. attorney here indicted the sheriff, the city police chief, several prominent attorneys in violation of the Volstead Act. Well, the city prosecutor, the state prosecutor, didn't like him going after the local guys, so he turned around and indicted the U.S. attorney. And there was a U.S. district judge at the time. His name was Robert Irvin. He especially appointed Sam Johnston to work with him. Okay, that's great. He specially appointed Sam Johnston to bring disbarment proceedings against the sitting U.S. attorney here in the Southern District, which was pretty significant. They brought in a special judge from Birmingham, and the judge heard the evidence involved and actually suspended the U.S. attorney from practicing law here, and which is pretty impressive considering Johnston, I think, was only 35 at the time, and most of the people had been practicing law longer than he'd been alive. But that's how well respected Sam Johnston was. And he'd also, many of y'all heard about the famous lawyer here in Mobile, Foster Hale, who was shot and killed by his girlfriend in his law office downtown. Happened in 1930. And Johnston defended Willie Mae Clausen. That was another very interesting story. She went to his law office. She'd been involved in a relationship with him when she was like 13 or 14, and Foster Hale was like in his 30s. And he had paid for this woman, this young girl, to go to school and continued an illicit affair with her. And she took advantage of it and took advantage of his pocketbook, and he basically had her on allowance. And then when the crash happened, he lost all his savings, and the money wasn't as forthcoming. So she came down to his law office and confronted him, and in his law office, and there was a gunshot heard in the law office. People arrived on the scene, and she was standing, laying over Foster Hale's prostrate body, and he was saying, "She shot me over nothing." They took him over to the city hospital, and he died that night. She admitted to it. She said, "He wrecked my life." Foster Hale was probably one of the most prominent attorneys here in town. He was also a municipal judge, well respected, and Johnston was actually appointed to represent, or he was retained to represent Willie Mae Clausen. Also, another famous lawyer, her name is Rosa Gerhardt. She was also one of the first female attorneys in the bar, and she did a fabulous job as well representing her. The case went to trial, and they came back with a misdemeanor conviction, which was pretty impressive. She was released in 10 months. But that's how, and that was how effective an orator and how well respected and what a good attorney that Johnston was. It was a case many seemed was hopeless. But anyway, he was also president of the state bar in 1940, president of the Mobile Bar Association. He held a deep appreciation for the classics, and there was a story that the Johnston family tells about how after he graduated from law school, one of the professors came up to his family and said he has no business practicing law. He needs to go into teaching because he has his love of the classics. He'll be more suited for that. Nonetheless, he did take up the practice of law. He originally practiced in a little town in Mississippi called Shabuta. Apparently, what the theory goes, one of the rumors about the case, what brought Johnston here was one of the Injuns had seen him practice law in Mississippi, and was so impressed with him that they offered him a job here in Mobile, and that's what brought him to Mobile. There, once again, is the obituary. He was 78 years old at the time of his passing. And once again, it says Mobile loses brilliant man. So anyway, 1969 in August, I think it was, well, most of you young ladies probably were not alive at that time. It was the second day of Woodstock Music Festival. Hurricane Camille was a day from striking here in Mobile. And the Johnston family was gathered at the funeral home. All the old lawyers were coming by. I guess probably similar to what it was like yesterday for Mr. Helmsing. All the lawyers in town and judges in town were coming by to pay their respects. And suddenly there appeared, and also at the funeral was Johnston's 10-year-old grandson, and I'll get to him in a second. But the 10-year-old grandson witnessed something, and I'll talk to him about this, and it really shocked the whole family. An old man appeared at the funeral, older, middle-aged, older man, appeared. Nobody in the family recognized who he was. He walks up to, there's an open casket, he walks up to Sam Johnston's casket, leans in and kisses Mr. Johnston on the cheek. Most of the family had no idea who he was, and he disappeared almost as abruptly as he came. Somebody had mentioned that maybe it was one of his old clients, maybe it was an old friend, but it turns out it was indeed one of his clients that we'll get to shortly. And that was a previous slide I showed you. That was involving Black Bart Chamberlain. To tell you what type of guy Johnston was. Johnston always fought for his clients, probably harder than, and sometimes the ethics would allow. He actually got in a fight and pulled a penknife on Black Bart in domestic court over a fight. Judge Grayson, who was the judge at the time, had to break it up. But Black Bart, his father, was actually also, I don't want to say nemesis, but it was the district attorney, what they called him back then, circuit solicitors. But anyway, that's just to tell you, he had kind of a real fiery temper, Johnston did. But the case really, before we get into in 1932 when this happened, it really kind of started in 1929, and it involved Mardi Gras. In the court, it was Miss Frances Whiting. She was the queen. The king actually was attorney here in Mobile, George Sossaman. And in that court was a gentleman by the name of Henry Morton Butler, Jr. And there was also another young lady from Louisiana, maid. Her name was Blossom. Shepherd was her name. There's Mr. Sossaman, kind of a tragic story. He died shortly after this in the 40s, suddenly. But he was the king of that particular Mardi Gras. There's Miss Whiting. I think it actually was. She may have been the first president of the Junior League. I think that's a Junior League picture of her right there I was able to get. In the court was Miss Blossom Shepherd. If y'all can see her there, she's the third from the left. She made her debut in that particular court as well. And they talk about how she was a charming girl from Louisiana. Her, I think it's her cousin lived here in Mobile and had married a wealthy businessman. Because I think she kind of came from a poverty type situation. It was actually right before the Depression. It was the last Mardi Gras before the Great Depression, so it was kind of like the last big hurrah before things got kind of, people had to kind of tighten their belt. But she was well respected, and they had a bunch of good stories about her in the newspaper. There she is again. That was in the Sunday Register, February of '29. Sometime during the Mardi Gras festivities and during the season, as they say, she struck up a relationship with Mr. Butler Jr. there. He's the one on the left. Mr. Butler Jr. Came from a prominent family here in Mobile. He and his father ran a real estate company called Butler Realty. They were located at the bottom of the old Bienville Hotel. I guess nowadays that's the Taylor Martino firm. That's where it is now. But it's a beautiful old hotel, and they tore it down. But that's where their office was located. And there's another kind of picture of them in the court. But they strike up a relationship during, they meet, I think, the first time during Mardi Gras, and they get married in 1930. Interestingly enough, one of the other maids in the court was a young lady by the name of Frances Grayson. Francis's father was a gentleman by the name of Claude Grayson. Claude Grayson was a circuit judge here in Mobile, served for about 40 years on the circuit bench. So it's hard to believe that all these folks would not have met, or at least been some of the death parties. Butler, Grayson, and Blossom. And there's actually, that's Mr. Butler on the left, and that's his father standing under the Butler Realty sign in the bottom of the old Bienville Hotel. It was taken about 1928. There's a better picture of the Bienville Hotel. Some of these pictures are priceless because you can see the trees in the bottom right corner from Bienville Square there. We're kind of catty-corny to it now. They also owned a construction company. You can see they obviously had a lot of workers for them, and I think they were doing pretty well at one time. I don't know if necessarily they had as much money as some of the other Mardi Gras folks, but they came from a really respected family, and his father was a banker, and I guess it wouldn't be a stretch to say that they were kind of part of the Mobile elite. That's a better picture of him right before the killing. It's in 1930. Trying to figure out where, it looks like it's in Mobile, but I can't figure out where it is. They wound up marrying in December of 1930, Butler and his wife Blossom. They have a son born in December of 1931, and that's his name was Henry Morton Butler III. All right, so we fast forward 30 years to 1932, August. There's another family on the other side of the bay. Their names are Dysons. Gentleman by the name of Raymond Dyson. He has two brothers, Raymond Dyson. He has Sam, which is his younger brother, and he has also a younger brother named George Dyson. Raymond's father actually was one of the founding members of the Fairhope Colony. He actually was a big proponent of the single tax theory and a lot of the socialist movement. He matriculated or came down from Philadelphia, where Henry George had kind of started that movement. And he was one of the first to settle the Fairhope area and put their utopian idea to reality. Raymond, I believe, was born in Philadelphia, but he was a young fellow when he came down here with his dad. It didn't take long for the Dysons to make their way in Fairhope. Their father, his name was Marmaduke. And interestingly enough, if you go walk in the Fairhope Museum, one of the first portraits you see on the wall is Marmaduke Dyson. He owned a company called Dyson and Company, and they were one of the largest contractors in town. They built most of Fairhope, including the post office and a lot of other buildings over there. We'll get to. They're known for reviving the Spanish mission-style architecture. You can still see some of it today, and that's because of the Dysons. But all three brothers worked for the dad. Actually, in August of '32, Raymond was actually nominated for one of the city council positions over there, and he was a candidate along with several other people. That's how well respected the Dyson family name was in Fairhope. Well, what happened, everything was going well for him professionally. He just graduated. Back then it was AAPi, Alabama Polytech. Now it's Auburn. He worked for his dad. He came back to Fairhope to work. Everything professionally was going great for him. But when he got back to Fairhope, he started to hear rumors. And, the rumors were that his wife had not been faithful to him. And there were rumors that she had an affair with a man from Mobile. And that this man from Mobile came from upper crust. He was well thought of, well liked, and he'd taken advantage of his wife, and he wanted to know the extent of the relationship and what had happened. She, of course, when confronted with it, denied everything. She denied it for about over 2 years, this thing, and he found out about it in 1930. And and he kept asking her and asking her and asking her. And she kept saying no, no, no. Finally, in May of 1932, after going down to the Gulf, he confronted her. She admitted to having the affair, and it came out that the affair coincided with her second pregnancy with their son. But his name was Bromley Dyson. So now he thinks he's questioning the legitimacy of his son. August rolls around. He can't take it anymore. Everybody in Fairhope's talking about it. He takes his brother, and they come over to Mobile to find out exactly what happened. They know with this butler where he is, where he lives. Apparently, Sam, the younger brother, knew Butler, the younger Henry Butler Jr., and knew him. So they come to Mobile to settle an affair of honor. They arrive in Mobile. They come down here to try to at least try to confront him. Raymond sends Sam to go meet with Butler at his office. He bumps into him that morning. He confronts him and says, "Listen, my brother really wants to talk to you." He says, "There's nothing we can talk about. I have nothing to say to your brother." So Sam goes back and finds Raymond and tells him he doesn't want to talk to you. So he and his brother Raymond they hatch a plan. They go in. They check into the Battle House. Which is literally, I think, right around the corner from the Bienville Hotel. They check in under assumed names, and they pretend to be prospective real estate buyers or purchasers from Ohio. What happens next, it's been highly contested, both the trials. They lure him into the room. They make phone calls, but I'll get to that in a second. Okay. So when they check in under assumed names. Sam checks them into the hotel. They in room 552 of the Battle House. They get in, they check in, they call Butler Realty, and they talk to Henry Butler's father, who says he's not in. Would you like to leave a message? No. They give it a couple more hours, they call again. Is Mr. Butler in? No. Would you like to leave a message? This time, I think they leave a message for him and tells him that we're in room 552 of the Battle House. Your name has been referred to us with prospective real estate purchasers. We'd like to meet with your son. So he takes the message. His son doesn't come in until later that afternoon. It's probably late in the afternoon, about 5 o'clock. His son comes in, finds a piece of paper. Butler Jr. comes in, finds a piece of paper with the room number and the name scribbled. He picks up the phone. His father sees him call. He smiles, asks, "I don't believe I know you, but I'll be over there in a second," something along those lines. He leaves the office, and that's the last time his father saw Henry Butler Jr. alive. Meanwhile, back at the Battle House, while all this is going on and they're waiting on Butler Jr. to arrive, they get tired and they don't think he's coming. They don't get the call back. I mean, they get the call back, but they're waiting and he doesn't come. Finally, Sam gets tired of waiting with his brother in the hotel room. Sam goes downstairs to the curb, gets in the car, waits on his brother, waits, he won't come down. Sam goes up to get his brother Raymond and says, "He's not coming. Let's go." Literally, as they're walking out of the hotel room into the threshold of the hallway, Henry Morton Butler Jr. comes alighting up the stairs. They snatch him, Raymond grabs him, throws him into the hotel room, and what actually happened in the room is highly contested, but
The coroner would later testify. They didn't have a medical examiner then, or the forensic sciences that we have now. Basically, it was a county coroner who would do all this. We would testify that they found him. They found a young man bound and gagged, beaten about the head, with the mirror in the room upturned, a candlestick on the floor broken, blood all over the floor, and a stool that had been overturned. The brothers, thinking that the testimony was at the trial, or what they told the police, was that they thought they just knocked him out. They leave. First place they go is North Mobile to, at the time, it was U.S. Steel Company. They figured that they better at least call somebody to go check on him. So they phoned from U.S. Steel Company to the battle house. Let me skip forward a few slides. Top left corner, the Dyson brothers call for help from the U.S. Steel Company, and they tell the operator that a man is seriously sick in room 552. Then they take, back then they just opened the Cochrane Bridge. It had been open for a few years. They get over to Daphne. They figure, well, let's call and make sure they did. They call over there again. Nobody has done anything. Please send a man over there. They wind up sending a bellhop named Clifton Burnett, the management does, and Clifton goes up there. He's a young bellhop. Knocks on the door, doesn't hear anything, but he says he hears something. He hears a little bit. What he said sounded like an old man snoring, but he didn't want to disturb him, so he went back down and did nothing about it. So finally, they get back to Fairhope. It's the sun's probably setting. You know how hot it is here, and they meet with their father, Marmaduke. That's him in the far right there. Marmaduke at this time now, he was president of the Bank of Fairhope. He was on the single tax colony board, I think, as well. He knows something's going wrong. Raymond tells his dad, we've made a mess of things. We think we probably hurt him. I think that was what the story was, but they say they didn't know that he was dead. So his father, thinking, well, I need to probably make sure this gets cleaned up properly. He makes a call from the Fairhope Exchange to check on the man in room 552. Of course, the operator at the Fairhope Exchange knows who Marmaduke Dyson is. Who doesn't know who Marmaduke Dyson is? And by this time, when the call comes back, the brothers have already. Raymond also meets with his father-in-law. His wife at the time, the one who had the affair, her name was Dorothy. Her maiden name was Grassfield. Dorothy. His father his name was Peter Grassfield, and they're originally from Iowa, and they were a pretty well thought of family as well. Peter talks with his father-in-law, and he talks, and his father says, you probably need to go hire an attorney. So at the time, they realized that yes, they probably needed to go hire an attorney. So they literally come back to Mobile, where they had come from, and go out. At the time, they went to an attorney by the name of Robert Gordon. Robert Gordon was a county attorney. He also practiced in private practice. He had probably had a lot of political clout, and that was one of the reasons why they wanted to go see him. Meanwhile, while all this is going on, they found Bart Chamberlain, who is the prosecutor. That's him in the bottom left-hand corner. Finds out what's going on. He goes and starts interviewing people. And Chamberlain kind of reminds me of my old boss, Whetstone. He was one of these guys that was kind of hands-on and likes to do his own work and investigate it and be right with law enforcement. They were able to find out where the calls had come from. They were able to trace the calls to Dyer's grocery store in Daphne. They interviewed some people over there, and then the last call that came in was what sealed it. It was made from that Fairhope Exchange, and it was charged to the residents of the Dysons, Marmaduke Dyson. So Chamberlain and his investigators, they come over to Fairhope that night to arrest the Dysons, or at least arrest Mr. Dyson, who made the call. The brothers, as they're pulling up to back to Mobile, brothers, as they pull up right in front of Robert Gordon's house, they come in, it's late in the evening, they want to speak with him, they're waiting out in his parlor. They're told that Mr. Gordon is not in. He is at the theater. He will not be in. So the brothers literally are walking out of the door when they run into a newspaper boy hawking the evening edition. Were splashed across the cover of the newspaper, local real estate man slain in Battle House. Then they knew they were now fugitives from justice. Chamberlain gets over there that night to chase the brothers. He's literally right on their heels. They may have even passed each other on Cochrane Bridge. I mean, ridden right next to each other. The Dysons know that they're wanted men now. They have their father-in-law on the way back to Fairhope drop them off at the old Malbus Road to hide, with instructions to have their brother George bring them a change of clothes and a car. They literally do that. George drops the car off for the brothers, and they flee. That night, Chamberlain gets over there, goes to Marmaduke Dyson and arrests him, brings him back to Mobile at 2 o'clock that morning, and holds him on what they call a general holding charge as a material witness in the case. All the newspapers were just, you have to understand now, this was before everybody had radio. There was no television, no Twitter, no internet. This was something that, can you imagine a better story to tell involving two prominent families from both sides of the bay? So this is kind of the stuff that the papers were reporting. Lured by telephone call, H.M. Butler Jr. is killed by 2 strange visitors. There's Mr. Dyson. He's the Marmaduke owner and operator of Dyson and Company. They bring him back to Mobile that morning. I was actually able to find the sergeant's docket at the old, it was at the city archives, where they have him being booked in, and they have the time of arrest, and you can look in the middle, it says where he is, Fairhope, Alabama. So now they have an idea, they know exactly who they're looking for. Raymond and Sam Dyson, the slang of the Mobile broker, continues. They search for them all over in Baldwin County. A couple days into the investigation, Chief Warren Birch of the Mobile Police Department gives a statement to the media, and this kind of blows the lid off of the motive. Miss Dyson is the main thing of the case. This is the only picture I was able to get of Miss Dyson, but that's her. I was hoping maybe somebody here may have access to one, knowing that some people here are from Fairhope, maybe. And this is what it's about, the affair between Henry Morton Butler Jr. and Miss Raymond Dyson. And that's why they called it an affair of honor. I'll get to the reason for that also in a second. They start bringing in everybody, all their friends, all their relatives. And Chamberlain just goes after everybody. He has convenes a grand jury, and the killing happened in August, but I need to tell you about how they were apprehended. That's it. Mobile registered in a couple days. They found out who is actually wanted. The suspects are, the top fold of the paper reads, search for Butler killer spreads over Dixie. The probe reveals 2 men have fled Fairhope. The woman's name is mentioned in the case. The hunt for the 2 brothers in the slang of the Mobile brokers continues in Baldwin County. They issued a BOLO. This was sent out to all local law enforcement. BOLO be on the lookout for. I think it was sent by telegram to all the local law enforcement throughout the area, and what they said was throughout Dixie. They give a description of both men, both the Dyson brothers, their size. They even have their shoe size, their weight, everything. Then some of the newspaper folks interview a gentleman by the name of Selden Stevens. Interestingly enough, Selden Stevens he wasn't the county coroner, he was the battle house physician. In the old days, they had all the old hotels, at least some of the nicer ones, they had an in-house physician, an in-house detective. Well, Stevens, I believe his office was at the old Van Antwerp building, which is still around. They go over and get him after they figure out something's wrong. The hotel does, and he's one of the first men that finds, first persons that finds Mr. Butler's body. He says that he found the lifeless body of a young white male in the bathroom. His hands were bound behind his back. The head showed signs of trauma with a deep wound across the forehead. He had bled profusely. His left eye was blackened. He had a handkerchief stuffed in the mouth of the victim. Stool in the room was overturned. There was a broken candlestick. And if you see right above where it says Tells Mobile Press, there's a circular mirror. I don't know if y'all can see that. This was not the actual room, but it was taken around the time this happened. I'm thinking probably what the room possibly could have looked like. When I heard about the mirror being upturned, that made me think it's probably what it was like. Another thing, they found $6 in Butler's pocket, and that ruled out robbery as a motive, so they knew right off that wasn't what it was. Now, the Mobile press was outraged, and they were calling for quick justice. They were calling for him to be electrocuted, because that was the manner of execution back then. They wanted blood, and they let it be known that that's exactly what they wanted. Fairhope, different story, completely different. This was one of their fair-haired boys. They loved him. The families of the Dyson members were friends with the editor of the owner and editor of the Fairhope Courier. interesting gentleman by the name of E.D. Gaston. A lot of y'all probably heard of him. Mr. Gaston literally was the founding father of Fairhope. He had started the colony. He had started the newspaper before they even moved to Fairhope, and he named it the Fairhope Courier because he said that their colony hopefully had a fair hope of succeeding. So that's where Fairhope came from. But this was kind of a situation where the Fairhope Press, they were already setting up the temporary insanity, and they said Fairhope is shocked by the terrible tragedy. These are all articles from the Fairhope Courier around the time. It says Raymond and Sam Dyson are charged with the killing in the hotel room. Two of the most esteemed Fairhope families involved. Temporary insanity. They're already setting up a defense for the brothers to try to help them get through it. They talk about it as being unplanned and unintended result of an act, which, while unlawful, did not contemplate death. Totally different from what they're saying in Mobile. And then the editor writes, this is Mr. Gaston there on the far left, he writes it and says, the saddest duty which has confronted the editor of the paper is to chronicle a sensational crime involving two of the brightest and most hopeful young men grown to manhood in this community, one resident here for over a quarter century, linked to the writer and his family in years of the warmest personal friendship and devotion to common and unselfish ideals. The other of short residence, talking about the grass fields, but also warm personal friends and standing high in the community. These men are wanted for capital murder. This is what the Mobile paper said in their editorial. It's a shocking crime. His slayers, as this is written, have not yet been arrested. Quick justice is needed in such a case. The bereaved family of Butler, his widow, her child, and the scores of friends of the popular young Mobile are entitled to such actions. Strangely enough, the intelligence and community standing of the accused fugitives is as high as the depravity and brutality of the crime is low. So, I mean, there, the stage is set. 2 days after, actually the day after this, really awful situation. Now you have Butler, who had an 8-month-old son, who widowed his wife, and now the son, the Dysons pretty much had taken his father away from him. This is Mr. Butler's mother. They saw, back then, they received and did a lot of the funerals at homes, personal residences. Their residence is still around. It was on Houston Street, and they entertained family and friends. I say entertained, really it was his wife that did most of the entertaining. His mother was so grief-stricken that she had to be given sedatives and couldn't see anybody. So basically you have the widow now. She's probably in her mid to late 20s with an 8-month-old son during the middle of the Great Depression now, not knowing what's going to happen to her or her family. It's just an awful situation. She gave a statement to the press about what had happened, but that was pretty much the extent of it. The father, Mr. Butler's father, Senior, that was his only son. Obviously, they were very, very close, and he was so grief-stricken he couldn't give any statements either. That's her. That's Blossom. You saw her earlier. She was in the 29 Mardi Gras court with Butler, where they first met, and she greets family and friends at the home. That's the 8-month-old son, H.M. Butler III, the little boy, who, like I said, was 8 months old. His father was deemed not fit to live by the Dyson brothers. Murder warrants, as soon as they take in, as soon as Marmaduke Dyson is arrested and they interview the Dyson family, they know exactly who this is. Warrants are issued for capital murder for Raymond and Sam Dyson. Interestingly enough, the brothers flee to Jacksonville. A couple days later, they wake up, they park their car, both of them walk over to the Jacksonville Police Department, coincidentally located on Liberty Street. There was a Jacksonville police officer out there smoking a cigarette in front of the police precinct when he said that he saw two well-dressed men, probably both in coat and ties, walk up to him and said that we went to a hotel, we want to turn ourselves in. We went to a hotel to beat a man named Butler, but we did not intend to kill him. It was a matter of honor. Immediately, Mobile police are dispatched. He waives extradition. Both brothers waive extradition, and they're brought back to Mobile in August and held without bond until October. They're brought before Judge, at the time, Judge David Eddington. He was back then he was a municipal court judge. They called him recorder's judge, recorder's court. They waived the preliminary examination. This time, they finally have an attorney, a gentleman by the name of D.F. Benjamin Franklin McMillan, Jr. Mr. McMillan was born and raised in Stockton, Alabama, up in North Baldwin, but he'd moved to Mobile and was practicing here, another well-prominent, thought-of attorney. First-degree indictments are sought as the grand jury opens the probe. 21 witnesses are called before, including Miss Dyson, Miss Raymond Dyson. But they back off of it for fear that if they get testimony from her that may be in violation of the spousal privilege and it may cause the indictments to be dismissed. So they don't call her, and they instead go with the witnesses that they have. They're indicted in October. They come before the judge. They plead their pleas of not guilty and not guilty by reason of insanity. Just checking on what time. They're getting ready for trial. There have been some problems with the courthouse at the time, structural problems. They call in the county attorney, Judge Grayson does, who's the presiding circuit judge. John Peavy's got to be related to the same Peavy. He takes a look at the courthouse and says, well, the upstairs gallery, I'd be careful about that. I wouldn't have too many people up there. So the judge winds up closing, I think, closing the upper gallery. All right, now we're ready for the trial. They don't try the brothers separately. They try them separately. First one they try is Raymond Dyson. He's the main guy. The evidence against him is the strongest. That's usually how it goes. Now, the circuit judge, I've kind of mentioned it before, I haven't told you too much about him. It's Claude Grayson is his name. We know that his daughter was in 1929 Mighty Golf Court, probably ran in the same circles with the victim. I don't see how or why there was no motion to recuse himself, but apparently there wasn't. Now, there was no direct evidence, I haven't found that in any research, that he knew them, but I'm sure they had to have known each other. Interesting enough, Judge Grayson was a native of Madison County. He came to Mobile in 1906 to practice law. He actually served in the state legislature with the prosecutor, Bart Chamberlain. He assumed the bench around 1918. He served almost 40 years on the circuit bench from 1958. He actually died while he was a circuit judge. In 1929, he was the presiding circuit judge. He was appointed to that position or elected to that position. I'm not sure how they did it back then. I guess maybe by seniority, but he served for his presiding judge until his death in '58. Now here we go. They also bring in another Chamberlain. At the time, they allowed the prosecutors to practice law as well. And he had a young associate by the name of Jack Courtney, Jack Courtney. Many of you probably know his grandson, Ricky Courtney, who's a member of our bar. That's him in the far left corner. You have the two brothers, and you have McMillan there on the right, and then we're getting to the top right corner of Sam Johnston. So they bring in all the witnesses to swear everybody in before they strike a jury, and they bring in Miss Raymond Dyson, and she swears, she is sworn in to be one of the witnesses, and they invoke the rule. And for those of you who don't know, anybody that's going to be a witness in a matter, in any case, they'll invoke the rule so they can't hear what other witnesses say, and they can't tailor or craft their testimony to match what other witnesses say. So obviously she would be an important witness to keep out of the courtroom, especially if that's going to be the centerpiece of your defense, which as it turned out later was. So immediately Chamberlain tries to get the judge to put Ms. Dyson out since she's going to be a witness in the case. Judge Grayson, kind of in a pivotal moment of the trial, said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to invoke, and it's within the discretion of the judge. He said, no, I think where a man is on trial for his life, he has a right to have his wife by his side. So kind of a dramatic moment. But she stays in. And there's Bart Chamberlain. A little bit about Bart, so you can know what kind of guy he was. I kind of told you a little bit about him. Many of you probably know his son, Black Bart, who just died in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Kind of was a fugitive kind of from justice. He had a bunch of tax money and violated the embargo in the 70s. But Black Bart was his son. This Mr. Chamberlain, he lived on Monterey, no, Reed. He lived on Reed Street here in Midtown. Now it's Midtown, probably then it was West Mobile. But he was a very good prosecutor, and he didn't lose a lot. In fact, he lost very rarely. And he'd actually sent so many men to the electric chair that it was widely and facetiously rumored that he had an unholy alliance with Alabama Power. His electric chair helped juice helped keep Alabama Power in the black, which is, during the Depression was pretty important. He was a graduate of Barton Academy here in Mobile and later University of Alabama. He was admitted to the bar in 1911. As I said, he served in the legislature until 1919 alongside before Judge Grayson. He was elected circuit solicitor, now we call him district attorney, in 1919, where he served over 4 terms until his untimely death in 1943. From 1921 to January of 1932, I was able to do some research. 9 criminal defendants from Mobile were executed. Whether all these defendants were sent to their death by Chamberlain, I'm not really sure. But with the short appeal times and before a lot of the Bill of Rights protections applied to the states, it is likely most of those were his. And so he was a tough fighter, and he didn't lose often. And a lot of times in these capital cases, many defendants met their match and were ultimately executed. So obviously, I'm sure the Dysons were obviously a little bit nervous when their dad goes into custody, and then they're charged with 2 counts of capital murder. Or excuse me, both of them are charged with 1 count of capital murder in the death of Raymond Dyson. Excuse me, Henry Butler Jr. Interestingly enough, Chamberlain, he had a really good friend and mentor by the name of Joseph Lyons. Many of y'all may recognize him. His grandson is actually Gus Mayer here in this building. He's also a member of our bar as well. He hired and mentored Bart Chamberlain as an office boy. He gave him a job. Lyons actually was a Harvard Law graduate, and probably many people will say he was probably one of the most well-respected and most intelligent attorneys that Mobile Bar has ever had. President Wilson had actually appointed him as collector of customs here in the Port of Mobile in 1918. President Roosevelt later reappointed him in 1933. He was actually a founding partner in LPC, now Phelps Dunbar, Jeffy. So there's your connection there. But anyway, that's who took Bart Chamberlain under his wing, helped him with his education, because I don't think Chamberlain had a lot of opportunities that some other attorneys did. And Chamberlain worked for everything he got, and Lyons played a significant role in his life. I'd kind of be remiss if I didn't mention him in talking about Chamberlain. There's Courtney, young guy, law partners with Chamberlain. Very good attorney as well, well thought of here. Courtney came from kind of a political background as well. His father-in-law was Harry Hartwell. Harry Hartwell at one time was a 4-time mayor here and also a city commissioner. That's him with golfer Bobby Jones, and it looks like it's taken in front of the Battle House. But that was Courtney's father-in-law. All right, so they strike the jury. Here they are. They're actually listed the names and occupations of them. They don't do that. Usually they're protected by the judge. But interesting enough, there's names of. I'm hoping that maybe one of y'all may recognize some of these people. There's Cyrus Sibley, James Alvarez. I have Alvarez bolded for a reason. I'll get back to him in a sec. But anyway, the 12 men, notice all males, no females. And I think that made a big difference in what the outcome. I'll talk about that later. First day of the trial, the Fairhope Town Marshal misses the ferry, and he's held in contempt of court by Judge Grayson. They dispatched officers to go pick him up. He stumbles in the courtroom later in the afternoon, apologizing to the court, saying that he missed the bay boat. Prosecution starts off, they build their case. They talk about how the brothers, and I don't know if I mentioned this, the assumed names they check in at the Battle House under are R.B. Johnson and S.T. Johnson from Dayton, Ohio. They requested a room 552. Actually, they requested a room in the northeast corner of the hotel, which is the most isolated, secluded area of the hotel. They paid in cash. 3 calls were placed from the room to the Butler Realty. They were able to trace it. Bloody 3-cornered stool found lying on its side with blood on it. Even the window shades were pulled down in the room. The oval mirror in the room had been turned upwards as in signs of a struggle. The coroner was going to testify that the manner of death was a blow to the head by some blunt instruments. And they talk about how the brothers fled to Jacksonville and they were fugitives from justice and that they knew they were guilty and that's why they fled. So they're building the case up. Chamberlain is getting started, firing them up. All right. The defense knows that the best way to take on Chamberlain, the best way to win this case, the best way to disarm him is to admit everything. And that's what they did. They didn't try to say this was an accident. They admitted it. And they invoked the unwritten law. And the unwritten law, they put the victim on trial. And that's exactly what they did. They put everything about Mr. Butler on trial. They call him a homewrecker. They say that if it wasn't for Butler, this family, this never would have happened. He put himself in this position. In fact, during the opening statements of the trial, McMillan tells the jury Mr. Butler met his fate by his own hands and his own decision. The jury is actually sequestered in the old Cawthon Motel, now It's given way to Progress, which is a parking lot behind the bars there on Dolphin Street. And it's also, I believe that's St. Francis running up the side there. And it's right across from Bienville Square. Now it's an empty parking lot. But it was a beautiful old hotel, and that's where the jury was sequestered. The state calls the county coroner, a guy by the name of Dr. S.J. Walker. Interestingly enough, he testifies that Butler's belt had been removed from his trousers, and his trousers were partially torn open. Interesting little piece of information that the jury got to hear. So they called Dorothy, and it was a really sensational event. At the time, the newspapers, the judge let, and the reason we're able to find out about exactly what happened in the trial is the newspapers were allowed to bring in stenographers, and they took testimony verbatim. So a lot of the testimony is preserved, and that's how I was able to recreate a lot of the events. She takes the stand, and she bears her whole soul, talking about the affair, and that the reason she initially denied, she admits lying about the affair initially to her husband, and that when she told her husband, it drove him mad, and it was her fault. And of course, all the women were there. All the courtroom was packed. They were bringing lunch bags because they didn't want to have to get up during the middle of lunch and leave their seat because they're. I'm just kind of thinking about the Casey Anthony trial, people fighting out in the parking lot trying to get in. It was kind of similar to that in terms of the interest in it, because back then that was the only form of entertainment really in town. She talks about how they had an affair. Butler had an affair with her. They at Bailey's Creek in Fairhope. Her husband confronts her about it, and she finally admits to it. She tells him that he asked her, what is it about Butler that is lacking in me? She says, you can't be the man that Butler was, but he took it the wrong way, meaning that she was more interested in Butler than she was him. He just got so mad that he punched holes in the wall around the house. It was literally about, he had witnesses come and testify about his mental state. So they're trying to say this drove him to insanity. And back then, it was before we had real, psychology and psychiatry had really caught up. The medical science was kind of lacking. So judges back then would let lay witnesses offer expert testimony, which is kind of frightening. But they laid it on, and they laid it on thick. She talks about how it became so unbearable for her that she attempted to commit suicide. She tried to end it all. This is also another picture of the room, of a room, similar, I think, to it. She testifies that they got into another fight, and that the affair had indeed occurred during the time that she became pregnant, but told him that for sure the little boy Bromley was his, and assured him of that. During the trial, it came out, and this was learned by Raymond. Raymond found this out shortly before. This is one of the reasons I think that really sent him over the edge in Mobile in August of '32. During I believe it was in March of 1930, his wife told him that she was going to New Orleans with a friend to go shopping and to go visit some friends, or something like that. She was going with a friend over there, and she actually sent him a program of a little theater production over there that she'd attended. Well, now what Raymond remembers, so he was going through his personal effects right around May and June and July, the summer of '32, and he finds this, and he starts, obviously his mind's really starting to race on him, so he confronts her with it, and she admits, and it comes out, that she and her friend, she had driven to Bienville Square and met with a friend. She says she had no idea that Butler was going to be there, but they pull into Bienville Square to go to New Orleans to pick up a friend. Butler pulls up in his Packer and gets out, and they all ride over to New Orleans together. They actually check in to the Roosevelt Hotel, and they check in as husband and wife. Dorothy Dyson and Henry Morton Butler Jr. check in as husband and wife, and that was just too much for Butler to have to juggle with everything else, and that was really pushing him over the edge. And that was one of the reasons that it came out. I think that he sought to settle an affair of honor. It comes out at the trial. Raymond takes a stand. He talks about what happens in the room. He says, literally as he's walking out the door, Butler is coming up the stairs, He says, Mr. Butler, he confronts him right at the threshold at the room of the battle house. He says, Mr. Butler, you have done me a great wrong. I doubt the legitimacy of my son, and I want to know when your relations with my wife began. He says, conveniently, that Butler says, it's none of your damn business. And he said, Raymond testified that before Butler could take his glasses off, he punched him and threw him in the room. And they talk about the near miss at the battle house. Raymond and Sam became impatient after repeated calls to Butler, and they literally bump into Butler as they're exiting the room. Now, this is another interesting thing. Not many criminal defendants have the type of, I guess, connections and witnesses to testify for them, and of such high social standing. But that's exactly what happened with Dyson's. They called E.B. Gaston as one of the defense character witnesses. Mr. Gaston, he was well known in both Mobile and Baldwin County. As I said, he helped found the Fairhope Colony. He was owner and editor of the paper. He'd oftentimes come over here and give speeches and talk to people, and everybody respected Mr. Gaston. He was, I guess, proper word, he had a lot of gravitas, is what they call it. I guess he was kind of like one of those type guys. But he testified that he'd known Raymond and Sam he'd known Raymond all his life. What a good moral person he was. He came from a great family, and he was well respected in the community. They also called his childhood teacher, Miss Marietta Johnson. She founded the organic school over in Fairhope, and she had actually taught both Raymond, Sam, George, all the Dysons, and actually had taught Miss Dyson, Raymond's wife, Dorothy Dyson. And she was of national fame. Miss Johnson's school had been actually featured by John Dewey in his Schools of Tomorrow. They had a whole chapter in the book about her. They had written a whole page in the New York Times on Miss Johnson's school. She'd actually established another one of her organic schools in Greenwich, Connecticut. She traveled a lot, and she was the organic school, so everybody knows who she was. So she added a lot of, I guess, character evidence that really did help the Dyson brothers. They also called at the time, he was right before he became mayor, but he talked about how he personally knew Raymond and how he seemed mentally imbalanced in the months leading up to the trial, or months leading up to the killing, which furthered their insanity defense. Tony Klump also, he was a mayor of Fairhope at one time. He also testified for the brothers. Actually, Johnston actually called the sitting United States attorney to testify on behalf of the brothers. His name is Alex Birch. Birch was actually not called as a character witness. He was called as an impeachment witness. He testified that the coroner had told him a statement that was inconsistent to his trial testimony, and that he testified that Dr. Walker had told him that Butler had died from a possible head strike when his head hit the floor instead of from some blunt instrument. So that was pretty significant to argue, I guess, for reasonable doubt as to the intent of them trying to kill. It was just an accident in terms of what their defense, part of their defense. So finally we get to the closing arguments. It takes several days. The trial lasted about a week. Jack Courtney gets up, gives a real impassioned speech on behalf of Raymond, on behalf of the Butler family. He says, "You're going to be asked to render a verdict for acquittal. You're going to be asked to say to that widow, to say to that baby, your husband and your father wasn't fit to live. Someone took his life, but despite all that, your father was not a fit member of the human race. That brand can only be put on that widow and baby by your verdict. The defense is that the defendant is insane, yet it is a remarkable thing that witness after witness was put on that stand to tell you how intelligent he is." Talking about all the character witnesses and all the people that had come from Fairhope to testify for him. The purpose of that plea, that defense of insanity, was to bring in a lot of evidence to sway you. Is it right to stigmatize a boy because of some indiscretion of his youth? To stigmatize a child of that man? If you render a verdict of acquittal in this case, you say just that to the child of the man who was not here to give his side of this case because his life has been taken. Pretty good stuff. I think the jury probably appreciated it. But, you know, he wasn't there, Butler wasn't there to defend himself, so everything that was thrown at him was pretty much gone uncontested. Johnston gets up. He's done a really good job in the case. He gets up to make his closing arguments. He says to the jury, "Ladies and gentlemen, I say to you that the electric chair has no fears for this defendant. I say to you that neither you nor the state of Alabama has anything in your arsenal that will bring fear to him. I say to you, he would rather have gone to the electric chair than have this woman by his side testify what she did. And she went into all the sordid particulars of the relationship and the affair. I believe there are 13 men to this jury, and I believe there is an inarticulate voice that is speaking to you. Raymond Dyson is entitled to an honest chance. There are 13 men on this jury because the infinite God is in this room today. By what judgment you judge, ye shall be judged. This man is wailing today in Gethsemane. They do not know that 0 hour has struck for them. Pretty good stuff. Not many attorneys talk that way now. But that's some kind of, you can see how eloquent and intelligent Sam Johnston was, and how powerful his closing argument was. The jury gets the verdict. They come back in 23 minutes. They find him not guilty. Dorothy Dyson faints in the courtroom as all of the town of Fairhope has descended upon the courtroom to hear the verdict read. The New York Times actually runs the acquittal. Albeit it was buried on page 14, but they run with it. It says, acquitted of slaying in Mobile. A jury of Mobile Circuit Court today acquitted Raymond Dyson of the slaying H.M. Butler Jr., socially prominent here. That night, this is kind of a mockery of law and justice. There was an old Mobile paper here called the Mobile Post. Getting close on it. They run a story. It says that the Post has been informed that on the night of the 14th, which was the acquittal, quite a hilarious party was given in honor of the acquittal at the residence of the principal defense attorney, Mr. Sam Johnson, after which a supper was held at the Battle House Hotel. Mr. and Mrs. Raymond Dyson, Mr. and Mrs. Sam Johnson, City Commissioner Cecil Bates' wife, and remember the juror, Mr. Alvarez? Very interesting. Mr. and Mrs. James Alvarez. The Post is further informed that certain other persons were indicted but had previous engagement. So you had the commissioner, one of the city commissioners, Cecil Bates was there, Raymond was there, his wife was there, Sam Johnson was there, in the same hotel where the victim was brutally murdered. Chamberlain obviously is upset. Says Fairhope, all the people in Fairhope, Fairhope Courier is now saying, listen, you have acquitted the real bad guy here, who the case was strongest against him. You should really let Sam go. You shouldn't try him. The case against Sam Johnston needs to be dismissed. Chamberlain says, no way, not so fast. He's going to prosecute it to the end, he says. And he does. So they try Sam Dyson. He actually has to, he spends Christmas in jail. And it's kind of counterintuitive or ironic that Raymond's free now. He's out. But Sam now could still get convicted and face a death penalty. This time they also bring in, Chamberlain also brings in another special prosecutor, a gentleman by the name of Dan Thomas. I don't know if many of you remember Judge Thomas, federal judge here for forever. This is when he was a younger guy. I think he was actually appointed to the federal bench by Judge Truman. So that's him. They bring him in to try the case. Thomas was actually, he's from Watauga County, where Prattville is. His uncle was a member of the Alabama Supreme Court. His other uncle was clerk of the Alabama Supreme Court. As I said, he was appointed by President Truman and served 49 years on the federal bench here in the Southern District. So here we go, round two. We have Thomas, Courtney, and Chamberlain against McMillan and Johnston again. This time the jury gets it. The judge gets the case to the jury like 11:30 at night. While the jury is deliberating, or during the closing arguments, Raymond's in attendance. He walks across the hall to the other unlit courtroom, gets on his knees, and prays for his brother's acquittal. The jury gets it, returns a verdict around midnight. They were out 5 minutes, not guilty. Raymond, after they've acquitted his brother, walks up to the prosecutor, Bart Chamberlain. He says, Mr. Chamberlain, I don't know whether you want to shake hands with me, but I want you to know there is no hard feelings. Chamberlain puts his arm on Raymond's shoulder and shook his hand, replying, I only did my duty. Later that same day, Willie Mae Clausen gets out of jail. She was the one that shot and killed Foster Hale, the Johnston represented. So he had two acquittals, or two of his clients are set free on the same day. She later marries the jail turnkey where she was staying, DeWitt Pryor. Very interesting story. That'll have to be another one I have to know about. And then they talk, the press is brutal to Chamberlain. Talks about how he blew it, didn't strike the right jury, how could he lose the case. Blossom Butler attended the first day of the trial of Raymond. She was so broken up, stayed maybe the first day when they were striking jury left and never came back. She just couldn't handle it. Butler's mother never came. The only people that attended from the Butler family were his father and his sister. Then Chamberlain looks into jury tampering. He's concerned that some of the, he hears rumors and has evidence that some of the potential jurors may have been contacted by the defense attorney or or family members of the Dysons. So he convenes a special grand jury to investigate it. They can't get enough evidence. No indictments are returned. They say the friends of the defendant were charged with having tried to contact prospective jurors to solicit them for not guilty verdicts. There's that James Alvarez again. Interesting guy. All right, and that was it. They were off. And there was kind of an epilogue to it. And I kind of talk about this being either, is this really a tale of revenge about how the honor killing played out? And they use the unwritten law being that if you have relations with another man's wife, you can use whatever means necessary to dispatch him. Justice be damned. And that's exactly what happened. The unwritten law played out, and that's what the jury, nowadays we call it jury nullification. But that's what happened. What happened after the trial? Raymond Pop Dyson, that's him. He lived to be in his 90s. He went on to, he moved out of Fairhope after this was over several years later, started over basically in Fairhope. He built Pensacola's Baptist Hospital. He built the Escambia General Hospital, Sacred Heart Hospital, the Bayfront Auditorium. Generous philanthropist to the University of West Florida and the Salvation Army. He was named the Businessman of the Year by the Pensacola News Journal in 1962. They named a wing of the University of West Florida Center for Performing Arts after him. He gave a ton of money to them and was a great philanthropist. Here it is right there. They even have his portrait's actually hung and hangs there to this day. He was actually also awarded a Doctor of Laws degree from the University of West Florida in 1983. He died in 1999. He was 96 years old. At the time, the Pensacola News Journal article notes that he was a longtime contractor remembered for building a dynasty. His wife died shortly, I think, thereafter. They actually stayed married until the 60s. They wound up getting a divorce, but I thought it was strange that they would stay married for that long a period of time and then separate. But she kept the Dyson name till the very end. She actually served, I think she may have been the first city councilwoman in Pensacola. She served on the city council and only resigned after their business that she was working for the family put in a contract with the city, so there was a conflict and she resigned. Mr. Sam Dyson remained in Fairhope and lived there throughout the remainder of his life. Many of you may have heard of him or know of him. That's him in later years. He died. He was 90 years old. He lived a long and fruitful life as well. This is an interesting picture. These were all the brothers that were involved in the killing that night, or at least had some role in it. George is the one I haven't showed you. That's the one who provided them with the clothes and the getaway car. That's him in the middle. Raymond's on the far right and Sam's on the left. All these are photographs I was able to get from the Fairhope Museum. On February 21st of 1988, Mayor Nix recognized Sam Dyson by declaring proclamation of the day in his honor for his services to the community. He served on the board of Thomas Hospital and to his credit, he served and kept alive for a while the organic school, and he played a prominent role in Miss Marietta Johnson's original idea and founding of the school and where it should go and the principles embodied. Shortly after his passing, Dyson was quoted, his son was quoted, he said, "You'll find two schools who thought about my dad, Sam. Those who stood by him on everything and those who thought he was the world's meanest man." I thought that was interesting. At the time of his death, Mr. Sam Dyson was considered by many to be one of the most influential, if not powerful, citizens in Fairhope. And another twist of fate, Butler was originally buried in Magnolia Cemetery, but he was reinterred alongside his parents at Pinecrest, literally about 200 yards from where Sam Johnston is buried. Johnston's grandson, you may recognize him. It's Judge Rusty Johnston. And that was a 10-year-old boy at the funeral home who saw the old man come up and kiss his granddaddy on the cheek. That's the young boy, Henry Morton Butler III. I found him. He's alive. He'll turn 80 in December. I found him, of all places, one of his grandkids had set up a Facebook page for him. And I was able to locate him, and I told him he had no idea about all the particulars of what happened. He didn't know his father had been killed, the manner in which he'd been killed, until well after he was married. Then his mother told him in about 10 minutes, only after his wife had prodded him to find out what had happened. Before that, he had always been told that his father had died in a tragic accident. That's Blossom. She never remarried. She moved back a widow to Louisiana, where she lived out her days there. That's Mr. Butler III. Henry Morton Butler III, the infant you saw sitting in his dad's lap. He was 8 months old when his dad was brutally taken from him by the Dysons. And this is a most unlikely rendezvous. As I mentioned, Judge Johnston and I and Butler all met one evening, and I thought that was very interesting, and we all brought everybody back together. It was very interesting. Butler was very inquisitive about his grandfather and the research. And Judge Rusty actually is the one who got me interested in this. He said that his grandfather had one time represented 2 brothers from Fairhope who were charged with murdering a guy at the Battle House. I'd never heard of the story, and that's what got me researching it. It was just kind of like an academic thing. But that's what got me involved in it. Listen, there's also a Facebook page I put on here with all the persons involved in it, and a little bit of the side stories. There's a ton of other stuff. I just ran out of time, and I apologize for running over. But do me a favor, go on Facebook tonight and write what you thought about the presentation, if you would. If you go to Google, just type in Battle House Honor Killing. There's some actual videos I made of some of the slideshows and the other stuff that I didn't go over today. And also, if you go to YouTube, there's like a 50-minute clip I put together of all the different people and events involved in it. But let me know what you think. Put something on Facebook if you would. Thank you all. I'm sorry I ran over. The end.
So who was the old man? Was it Raymond?
Very good question. I don't know for sure.
Oh, you don't know?
I don't think Judge Rusty knew either for sure. But it probably was Raymond, I'm thinking. But also, if y'all see anybody you know or have a story about any persons involved in this, or y'all know anything, send me something. I'd like to know about it. Figured some of y'all may know some of these people out there. I found Martin Dyson, his son, was a member of our board, but now he's retired and he's fiscal administrator. Dak Dyson. Nobody in Dyson now. In fairness, I tried. Oh no, fine. Yeah.
You mean the news?
I'll see you in the house.
Okay.
So you guys will be ahead of I saw sheep jumping over there. You're counting, I'll tell you. I have this just noticed also. Oh, yeah. Now they say that. Of course, that's what they make. Never know. West Coast said, Jesus can get off well.
Y'all have a good day, then. Don't worry about it.
It was so
I'll see you. Thank you. Yeah, that's fine. Can you get all this stuff?
Oh,
Sure.
Please.
All right, back to work.
No, but I'm fine. Thank you. I'm just going to load all this back. Absolutely. Well, I'm glad y'all enjoyed it. It's the biggest part of the family. I'm just sorry it's so long and he didn't have enough time to, he had to hurry through it.
How many did you come up with?
48.
48.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And how many places did y'all set? Did you originally set? Do you know how many you originally set?
I didn't count the chairs, I count people.
We had enough chairs over here, but
I told her 45, and
Yeah,
I
we
have an
set
understanding,
45.
there's a five-person bumper. You know, I have a race of
well,
five
we had
people.
before came in and set
Right,
up
but
here.
I just, you know, I just want to make sure
I
I.
set for 45 over here, but then I count people, I didn't count chairs.